Coming to you from an abandoned lighthouse on the sea.
The horror.
It's the little podcast of horrors with James, Christina, and Chris. Welcome to Little Podcast of Horrors, episode 14. I'm Chris.
I'm Christina.
I'm James.
So James is going to be giving the story today.
Yes.
This is awkward.
I know, he's just like, I'm
waiting for my segue.
oh, okay, sorry.
We're
Ladies and gentlemen,
professionals here. Need a transition.
you're right, I'm sorry.
A cue.
Ladies and gentlemen, sit down and let James David Panetti weave his story of weird, sciencey things. And now, here is James.
Here I am. Hi,
Hey, guys.
everybody.
How's everybody doing?
So, for those who have listened to past episodes, and this isn't your first time, recently we talked about the world ending in 2012.
Oh, wait. What's everybody drinking?
Well, I have been in need of lots of coffee today. So my second round, I've been having my second round of coffee today.
Nice.
Keeping
Nice.
myself caffeinated.
Cool. I am having, once again, one of my favorites, Old Granddad bourbon. If you're looking for a bourbon that kicks you right there in the happy places, have yourself a glass of Old Granddad.
You can rely on Granddad to kick you in the happy places.
That's right. Thanks, Granddad.
See you in court.
Oh my god.
I'm drinking water because I have to drive my son to a slumber party. So
Okay. So I'm the drinker today. That's
Yep.
great. Way to go, me. All righty.
I'll have one next time, Chris.
All right, fantastic. All right. And now back to James.
Okay, so just to refresh the memories, when we were talking about the world ending in 2012, we touched on Christina. You look like you were about to say something.
I was gonna say episode 12, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
for those who haven't listened to it, they can go back. It's episode 12. There we go. Okay, sorry, go
Episode
ahead.
12 about 2012.
Yeah,
Perfect.
perfect.
Yeah, so when we were talking about the world ending in 2012, we briefly talked about the Montauk Project, or Montauk, Montauk, if you want to go Googling it. But the Montauk Project is all about these happenings at a real life place called Camp Hero. You can go visit it today. And if you recall, it's the place that was basically like Stranger Things is heavily based on the Montauk Project in Camp Hero. We aren't really talking about the Montauk Project today, but file that away in the back of your head because it's all going to relate.
Okay.
But when we were talking about the world ending in 2012, and when we were specifically talking about the Montauk Project, so if you remember the context, I was explaining that there were claims at Camp Hero that they had worked out some time travel, but they were never able to time travel past 2012.
Right.
Okay. So when I was talking about the Montauk Project, there was a quick drop about the Philadelphia experiment, and then we moved on. Today, we're talking about the Philadelphia experiment.
Awesome.
So buckle in, folks, because this one's a doozy.
Click.
So we're gonna basically have two dudes kind of as the centerpiece of the story. One is Carl M. Allen, and our boy Carl was an ex-merchant mariner, so merchant navy and all that jazz. And in 1955, well, before I run off with that, so merchant marines, he was on ships out in the water and all that kind of jazz, right? Okay, so in 1955 is kind of where the ball gets rolling here. Allen sends this anonymous package to an author who is going to be our second sort of main character here, by the name of Morris K. Jessup. So Jessup's claim to fame is he was an astronomer, like masters in astronomy, so like real deal scientist, not a
Wow.
somebody with some legitimacy for a change, right?
He wasn't
But,
like Nostradamus with his long beard reading the stars.
Right,
It's
right,
like-
right, right,
I got
Right.
my certificate in astronomy from Udemy.
right. So this is kind of a case of an actual certified astronomer being in play here. So, but his claim to fame was he authored a book titled "The Case for the UFO: Unidentified Flying Objects," and sort of his specialization as an astronomer was he was kind of the go-to guy for theorizing how UFOs might be able to propel themselves. So,
Cool.
possible propulsion science for UFOs. Okay, so Allen sends this anonymous package to Jessup, and these guys don't know each other. Jessup doesn't know Allen from Bob, and again, this is an anonymous package. But it sends this anonymous package marked "Happy Easter" to the U.S. Office of Naval Research. Sorry, so he didn't send it to Jessup. He sends it to the U.S. Office of Naval Research.
Wow.
But
Happy Easter,
inside-
guys, the Navy. Here's some
Yeah.
eggs, guys. Go find them. Where
So
are
inside-
they?
So inside this Happy Easter box is Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO.
I'm
Oh,
just gonna slip this in right here. I don't know how I got it there. It's just an egg.
I'm a big fan.
So why in the world did Allen anonymously send a copy of Jessup's book to the Office of Naval Research? Well, when the Naval Research Office opens it, it's not just any old copy of the book. There's apparently a whole bunch of handwritten notes throughout the margins of the book
Oh,
in 3 shades of ink. In
Three shades.
3 shades of blue ink.
3 shades
Okay.
of crazy.
So each different shade, color of ink or whatnot represents a different person's thoughts. So we basically have 3 people jotting notes down in this book.
do they have a key, like a ledger that says this is so and so's notes?
No, that's actually part of the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was all that you could tell was like there's 3 people talking, and kind of have fun figuring out who the 3 people are. But it's basically just throughout the margins here are these notes that are detailing this debate between the 3 people. And at this point, they could only identify one of the people as apparently going by the name of Jemi, Jemi. Jemi.
Okay.
All 3 of them, however, refer to themselves as gypsies.
That's
which
not a
I'm guessing-
PC term.
Yeah, I don't. I'm under the impression they don't mean literal gypsies. It's just kind of like their group name, I guess, their band
Yeah.
name, if you will.
I'm
They're
kind of curious,
gypsies.
is this really 3 people, or is it just one person who has spent a lot of time with themselves and nobody else?
That is one of the questions to be raised. So anyway, this debate between the 3 gypsies throughout the margins are commenting on Jessup's ideas about flying saucer propulsion and aliens, and they also expressed a concern that Jessup was too close to discovering their technology.
Oh, okay.
So in addition to the 3 people not being clearly identified, to ramp the difficulty up even further, where the notes were full of just weird uses of capitalization, I'm assuming things being capitalized that shouldn't be, and things that should be capitalized not being, just kind of like random capitalization and punctuation.
Code? Like a code?
Possibly. To many, to many, it apparently just seemed like barely intelligible rambling. To which I would say is like, isn't that typical?
Yeah.
Because like, if you notice, like, if you've got your crazy uncle, going on about conspiracy theories on Facebook, it's always like the grammar is a wreck. This just seems to be like a trait that has to, you gotta stick with the theme.
We gypsies, you don't understand, man. He's too close. He's too close to this. Yes, I know it. I know it completely. Shut up, Maud. Shut your mouth. We're having a theoretical discussion on alien propulsion here.
So, all of these various notes detailing the debate between these three dudes drop indirect references to the Philadelphia experiment. And this is what first raises interest into it. Okay, so fast forward a year, and in January of 1956, Carl writes to Jessup again, but this time, well, not again, this is the first time he writes directly to Jessup, but he writes directly to Jessup, sends the dude a letter, and writes under a pseudonym of, instead of Carl M. Allen, he identifies himself as Carlos Miguel Allende, for whatever reason.
Smooth, yeah.
Wow, it's just like he puts on a big black mustache. Hello, no.
Like,
Don't you
totally
just, you look, is that you, Phil? No.
Is that you,
It is
Carl?
I, Philo Calamare. No need. What? No, take the mustache off, Phil. We all know it's you. No, it is not.
So Carlos/Carl writes Jessup to warn him that he needs to refrain from further investigating UFO levitation. And he goes on to share a story on quote unquote dangerous science that was based on Albert Einstein's unpublished theories. And Carlos claims that a scientist by the name of Franklin Reno puts those unpublished theories into practice during the Philadelphia experiment at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in October of 1943. So again, everything keeps pointing back to this Philadelphia shipyard. So we learn more about Allen at this point, and Allen, I mentioned in merchant marines, merchant navy, merchant ships. He was specifically served aboard the USS Firaseth in Philadelphia. While he was aboard the Firaseth, he claims that he witnessed another ship, a Navy ship, that was visible from his vantage point standing on the deck of the Firaseth. The other ship, as he was watching it, vanished for several minutes before reappearing in the shipyard where it had been.
Okay.
And then Allen goes on to talk about in this letter what happened to the ship's crew when it reappears, which we'll go into all sorts of detail about that here shortly. So this gets
spoiler alert. It doesn't go well for them.
they were partying, just having booze. It was great. They were dancing girls, and it was like, wow, what happened while they were gone for? So anyway, this gets Jessup's interest, and Jessup writes back to Carlos and requests more information. Allen replies, or Allende replies, that one, his own memory would have to be recovered, which what? More on that. There will be more on that. But for now, like, what do you mean recovered. Okay.
You're the one that brought this up, bro. Like,
Right. So instead, Allende references a Philadelphia newspaper article on the incident, which, spoiler alert, doesn't seem to exist.
Okay.
But he claims there was one, and he references it. Okay, so Jessup is now interested. And then in 1957, the Office of Naval Research reaches out to Jessup, which is not really the most, one might not think this is the most welcoming thing ever, because this is almost akin to having like the Men in Black show up to ask questions, right? So
the
Office of
Navy
Naval
version.
right. The Navy Men in Black. So the ONR, Office of Naval Research, invites Jessup to come pay a visit. So of note, the Office of Naval Research is relatively newly formed at the time. It's a newish entity, and the ONR is in charge of Navy research and special projects, which is why you might be a little nervous if they come knocking on your door.
Special projects.
Right. So they show Jessup the annotated copy of his book from the Happy Easter box. And Jessup notices that, hey, these notes in the margin really resemble this Allende's guy's handwriting that I got in my letter. Okay, so pause for a sec to address what Chris was saying. Fast forward 12 years, we later learn that Allen would fess up and claim that he authored the annotations, all three of them. He was all three people.
Nailed
and
it.
He did it. He claimed to have done it not because it was fabricated, but to scare the hell out of Jessup. Because remember, in the letter, he's warning Jessup, like, you're getting too close, you need to back off. So
yeah.
he's just saying he did, which again, he didn't send it to Jessup, he sent it to the anyway, apparently
really
this is all his
way.
master plan. This is all his master, complex plan to scare Jessup out of, because I guess he really cared about this author. Okay.
Secret love.
Right.
Secret lovers experimenting with alien propulsion.
I'm wondering the three. Okay, so it's before we find out that he's the author of all three. Did he try to make the handwriting look different, or was he just like, let me just choose a different shade of blue and that'll get him?
I don't know. I haven't seen any images of the notes myself, and the only description that I've picked up from the like multiple sources as I was looking at it talks about how they're different colors or different shades, but not. There's no comments on the handwriting look.
He's just at the store and he's like, you know what? It's gonna be so stupid. It's brilliant. Blue, red, and black. Good luck finding out the truth.
So anyway, so let me unpause from that, 12 years ahead. No one knows that. So we're still operating on three mysterious note takers in the book, but oddly similar to Allende's handwriting. Okay, so Justice at the ONR, and then this captain, Captain Sidney Sherby, and Commander George W. Hoover, both take interest. It's like it has got their attention, which again, depending on your point of view, might be a little alarming that you're now getting like people, that high up the chain going, oh,
yeah,
really? So Hoover kind of dismisses it later because he basically said that since he was the special projects officer, like he had to investigate. Like as soon as people start talking about that, it technically falls under his umbrella, and he has to like check off the box to say look into it. But he says that he found no substantive evidence of anything weird. So of course he did. But Hoover discusses the book's notes with the then president of a Vero Manufacturing Corporation by the name of Austin N. Stanton. And this guy just pops up and then disappears. The only reason I bring him up is because Stanton, in turn, takes interest himself, and he produced mimographed copies of the book and the notes within it, and then publishes it through the ONR, which becomes known as the Vero edition. So that's only important to say that at this point the topic could have died down, but since like this guy for whatever reason decided to publish not only the book but the notes within it through the Office of Naval Research, like gets its attention again. Like here it is, back to the surface.
I'll not let this die.
Yes.
I shall show you the truth. I shall hold on to it.
But in this edition, the two other speakers are sort of identified. There's a Mr. A, supposedly Alan, which later we learn absolutely Alan, as are the other two, and a Mr. B. So anyway, all this just to say, like, the story now has new life. Okay, so all that's to lay the groundwork of how this got into the public eye to begin with. So now let's talk about the Philadelphia experiment itself. Now, what's going to be fun about this little tale is there are a lot of versions of a lot of different parts of the story. So what I have tried to do here is kind of merge together what the what's the word I'm looking for? Basically what the consensus seems to be. But if you go down this rabbit hole, you're going to find other versions, a bunch of different people involved in telling the story. So, you know, you get your various differences of reports. So I will try to account for that, but nonetheless, if you go down this rabbit hole yourself, you are going to find details that vary from what I'm telling you. So just, you know, heads up. So I'm trying to focus on the ones that seem to carry the most popularity or credence or whatever. Okay, so the experiment. So the Philadelphia experiment took place either in summer or October of 1943, depending on who you're talking to.
Okay.
But 1943, everybody agrees on that part. So 1943, testing begins on what's called Project Rainbow.
Aw.
Yeah, sailors and their rainbows, you know, it's a good time. So one version of the story basically says that Project Rainbow is based on Einstein's, we were talking about Einstein's unpublished theories. This is based on Einstein's unified field theory, which, to not do it justice and oversimplify everything, basically the essence of it is Einstein was trying to describe how it might be possible to take the electromagnetic field and a gravitational field and unite them into one field, hence unified field theory. So Project Rainbow is trying to do this. So researchers, and I say researchers because we have no names for these researchers, but researchers believed that this unified single field would allow electrical generators to bend light around an object, therefore rendering it invisible. Now, think about when this is taking place, 1943. What happens to be going on in the rest of the world?
World War
World
II.
War
The
II.
Nazis will never see us coming.
Yes. The idea of rendering something invisible is kind of particular use right now. Okay. However, there's a second version of the story is similar, but basically says that the researchers were attempting magnetic and gravitational measurements of the seafloor. Something related to experiments they were doing this somehow to try to discover anti-gravity. And apparently it was derived from sort of Hans Kammler's, if I'm pronouncing that right, of Nazi fame. His experiments, he was trying to discover anti-gravity, so they are trying to do the same thing. But again, the common thing between both versions is that researchers are trying to screw around with gravitational and electromagnetic forces at the same time. Okay. Regardless of which version you're following, the USS Eldridge, which is sitting in Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, is rigged with equipment, these generators and whatnot, while it's docked there in the shipyard. So one test, the first test, renders the Eldridge completely invisible. So test 1, mission accomplished. Kick on the generators,
Success.
vanishes from sight. All right, let's go attack some Nazis.
Sweet.
So hold on. Okay. So witnesses reported that the ship glowed with a greenish blue light and vanished and left behind a greenish fog where it had been. It comes back into visibility, and sailors come out of the experiment with severe nausea.
But they come back, so that's good.
Well, I mean, they didn't leave. By at least we're assuming, given what we know so far, they didn't leave. This is about invisibility, right? They just
the invisibility just makes them nauseated.
Yes. So some reports refer to this event and some other details about it as I originally said, the first experiment. Others is just one experiment. But I'm going to go with there were 2 experiments train of thought, because the second one is fun. Okay, so for first experiment, ship disappears, comes back. I go, yay, we did invisibility. Let's do it again.
This is going to be so much fun, guys. Here we go.
Well, you got to try more than once. You don't just go, okay, we're done.
Yeah, that's not how you do with science. All right. So, test 2. The ship disappears. Some say for hours. And then reappears, again, the same spot, with some of the sailors' bodies merged and fused into the metal structures and bulkheads of the ship at the molecular level.
My God, they were merged with the ship?
Merged.
Ew.
Yes. So specifically, like you'd have a sailor that was standing on one deck. He comes back a deck lower and then merged into the floor of the wall. So basically, the assumption here is that during the disappearance reappearance, they were like moving through walls and floors, and you don't want to be halfway when you come back.
Are there any audio recordings of this incident?
Not that I found.
I just want to be like,
thankfully,
you think about it like, hey, God, we're going through walls. This is amazing. Hey, Tom, you might want to not be going that way when we
And so remember, Alan's one of our eyewitnesses because he's on a ship nearby, right? He's watching this happen from his ship. I mean, he does say in his witness accounts that like you can hear the commotion when it comes back from where he's standing on his ship. So there are. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask: does his ship try to communicate with them at all, or?
Oh no, and they had nothing to do with each other. They were just kind of
totally unrelated.
So, yeah. One sailor in particular, like I said, appears a deck below where he originally stood, but that guy has his hand embedded in the steel hull, for example. Other sailors don't merge with the ship, but they rematerialize inside out.
What the hell?
Oh.
Why?
Others reappear but from that point they phase in and out of visibility. So they like reappear, then disappear and reappear, and then they're kind of, I guess, halfway.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
yet others just never reappeared at all. Some of them just never came back.
There are shadow people now.
Yes, right. That's why we have shadow people. They
Or
went
the
on
lizard
to
people in
stand
the
around
fourth
in people's
dimension.
bedrooms. So once standing in your bedroom, it's a sailor.
Of course it is.
That just kind of explain everything.
Oh my gosh, I don't like this.
So the ones that didn't suffer any of those side effects have mental breakdowns. Because I mean, of course you would.
Pansies, no.
Excuse me. So yeah, a lot come back with mental breakdowns, and some of which lead on to like ongoing psychological disorders, because of
Sure.
course it did.
Yeah.
And then and then some others came back with bird marks. So
Okay.
Alan writes that most of the sailors didn't survive. And then again, he tells some additional individual occurrences. He watched one sailor walk through his quarters wall in full sight of his family and then vanish.
Whoa.
And never came back?
Correct.
Okay.
Just walked through the wall, and that's the last you saw of them.
So even when they were back, they were still just like not really back because he was with his family.
Right. So he says, I was a little confused about that too, and I couldn't find other details. So he says walked through his quarters walls. So I was assuming his personal quarters on the ship, but his family was
Yeah.
there. So maybe they were visiting. I don't know. I mean, it is like just in the shipyard. It's not out at sea or anything. So I guess that could have happened, but take that as you will.
Okay.
And Alan also wrote an account that he watched two sailors just simply burst into flames, and they continued to burn for 18 days.
What?
Yep. So
Were
choose
they
your favorite way
alive?
to go.
Were they
I-
screaming the entire 18 days?
I
Oh,
hope
God.
not.
Yeah, I was to
Yeah,
say,
no.
I doubt it.
how does anything burn for 18 days? There's not what's
don't
burning?
How do people walk through walls? I don't know.
Yeah, I like how it's the fire. That's the line. I'll take vanishing, but
Hey man, don't judge me, okay? Walking through
And,
walls is one thing, but just endless burning, like no.
and so you were talking about that the things continue, like it's not just when they immediately come back, they kind of continue for a bit. So
Yeah.
to with that in mind, Alan also claims that he saw a group of these sailors having a bar fight at a nearby bar, and they just vanished in the middle of the bar fight.
That's a way to get out of it.
Right.
You know what?
So-
I'm gonna kick the shit out of you. What the hell? Where'd it go?
Just practicing for Nazi engagement.
Mhm.
So some claim that from that point on, the Navy modified the experiment to just focus on stealth technology, like being invisible to radar. That's good enough.
Let's stay in the sandbox.
Hey
Let's not
guys,
try to deviate.
let's tone this down a little bit, because I've seen people like totally burst into flames, then vanish and turn inside out. Maybe we're going a little too far with this. I don't know.
We're getting a lot of calls from families, so
We effed up, guys. Let's.
So it gets weirder.
How does it
So-
get
Oh, great.
weirder? Of course it does.
So some accounts, more or less stop there, but there's a number of other accounts that, let's see how to put this. So up to this point, we're talking about turning invisible and then coming back to visibility. The ship hasn't
Mhm.
actually gone anywhere, supposedly. Well, however, given some very strange eyewitness reports, it seems that the Eldridge didn't just turn invisible, it teleported
Mhm.
and went back in time.
Oh, I mean, sure. Where'd it go? Like what time?
It went to Norfolk, Virginia, 200 miles away, 10 minutes prior to when it left.
Oh, okay. Well, I
Well,
mean, still time travel.
just a little short trip back in time.
Right,
Very
right.
short.
And the reason, the reason we have those conclusions is because there are supposedly eyewitnesses from Norfolk who say they saw this Navy ship appear out of nowhere
Okay.
for X amount of time, depending on the version of the story, and
Mhm.
then vanish as mysteriously as it came. And their accounts are 10 minutes prior to when it left, unbeknownst to them.
Okay.
Okay. So, with that in mind, some claim that the sailors who went insane did so because of the disorientation they suffered from the experience of being in a hyperspace bubble outside of space-time. So the brief moment that they were just outside of time before popping out 10 minutes earlier, it was just, you're not supposed to experience that, and your brain goes bye-bye. So, eyewitness sports, right? So this comes from supposedly that men that were aboard the SS Andrew Firaseth saw the Eldridge sit in Norfolk for a few minutes before it vanished
Oh.
again. Some claim it was as much as, and then some claim it was 10 minutes earlier than when it disappeared. So the Eldridge then reappears in Philadelphia shipyard from the very spot from which it had vanished. So with all this, you'll note I've been saying, some men, some sailors, some, I'm not throwing some names. I've stopped throwing names at you. That's
Mhm.
because there are claims that the ship's crew were brainwashed to maintain secrecy. And so that you don't have a lot of like, I was Lieutenant such and such on ship such and such, and this is so that's why you're not hearing that, because they were brainwashed.
The ones that
Brainwashed
didn't
or like,
the ones that
sorry.
didn't burst into flames and get merged into walls, I mean, the ones those we didn't need to brainwash.
Right, right. And I am gonna bring up some specific sailors here in a minute, but for the most part, we kind of have a lack of them, supposedly for that reason. And by brainwashing, one of the claims is like basically they're using the CIA's MK Ultra program to do the brainwashing.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
Now to add,
I'm on board.
yeah, you don't want to be on board. It's the last place
Not
you
that
want to
ship.
be.
Not that one.
And then just as a side note, the gypsies, who we later learn is Alan,
Mhm.
uh, claimed that aliens made the ship vanish.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna
I
say, why
mean,
blame on aliens what we can, screw up ourselves.
yeah, exactly. Come on.
Okay. So about that brainwashing, our next character to show up on the scene is, I am gonna try not to butcher this pronunciation, Al Bielek. Bielek. So Bielek pops up onto the scene in 1988, which of note is 4 years after the fictional movie The Philadelphia Experiment hit theaters.
Okay.
So 88, Al is 57 at the time. He comes forward and claims that him and his brother were aboard the Eldridge during the experiment when they were both in their 20s. But he had been brainwashed by MK Ultra techniques to forget.
Wait,
Thankfully, oh, go ahead.
is that timing right? Hold on. It's 1988. He's at 57.
Yes.
And the Philadelphia experiment happened in 1943.
Yes.
So that's 45 years later. But that he'd be a teenager.
Yeah, maybe he's just really bad at math.
He's a
Or
liar.
or the time travel takes effect to
Actually-
Oh
this.
shit.
Actually-
Hold up.
Actually, right. Hold that thought. Okay, so so he's brainwashed by MK Ultra techniques to forget, but he sees the movie and that triggers like a flood of all these memories coming back.
Okay.
So, excuse me. Al claims that his real name, after remembering, was actually Edward Cameron, and his brother was Duncan Cameron. So fast forward a couple of years, in 1990, he tells his whole story at what's called the Mutual UFO Network conference. So during the conference, he claims that it was none other than Nikola Tesla who engineered the Eldridge's equipment to take the ship out of space-time. And that Tesla's devices opened a wormhole to the future through which these two sailors specifically passed, and instead of coming back with the Eldridge merged into it, these guys get separated and land in Camp Hero in August 12th of 1983.
Wait, okay.
This is where
I'm
the
having
math gets
trouble.
fun. Okay, so let me tie it together a little neater. Okay, so the Eldridge, sitting in a Philadelphia shipyard, 1943, it jumps out of space-time
Mhm.
during, so it comes back into space-time 10 minutes earlier with most of its crew minus two. The two, instead of going 10 minutes backward, go forward, are separated from the ship, and landed Camp Hero in 1983, 40 years later.
Okay.
So they have traveled forward in time 40 years. So, of course, Camp Hero is where the Montauk Project happened.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask, because I was like, I'm getting confused with all these names. Is this
Right.
back to that one. Okay. It's a callback.
Right. So the Cameron brothers, now that they're, stranded in 1983, joined the Montauk Project, which coincidentally had been born from the Philadelphia experiment, because both were screwing around with electromagnetic research.
Mhm.
Were they already in the, I mean, were they supposedly already in the midst of this project when the brothers showed up? Because I remember in the story you talking about like portals and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which, if they were already in the midst of doing that, maybe that's why they landed there. Because
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that is, I mean, I haven't seen that explicitly said, but it sure seems to be the case, since part of what they were doing was screwing with time.
I'm just wondering if that's what caused them to come forward. Like they came through a portal. Like, well, like these scientists, in 1983 doing this project, and then two World War II soldiers just come popping through. Like, that's a whole lot better than what happened last week with big giant, monstrous creatures
With the Demogorgon.
with the Demogorgon. So I'll take the two
Right?
sailors from World War II any day.
Yeah.
So to tie like three stories together, we got these two sailors from the Philadelphia experiment, jumped 40 years in the future, landed the Montauk Project, which, using time travel, discovers they can't go forward past 2012. Well, or remember that Arthur versions they do go past 2012, but find nothing but the statue of a horse.
Yeah.
So it's turtles all the way down, man. So we've got an overlap of all three things, and the
It's
whatever you want to call it, trilogy.
Yeah, as I was about to say, it's the trilogy of what the hell.
So, just to mention as a side note, because this is going to branch off into yet another story, but our two sailors' adventures with the Montauk Project go on. and we'll, if you, I want to come back to this for yet another episode, because as I said the last time I brought the Montauk Project up, it merits its own topic. But to give you a little spoilery, little sprinkle of what that's about,
A teaser.
the Montauk Project would go on to research space-time and opening space-time portals, and they would do some crazy stuff like create what's called the Montauk chair, which, without going into it, the thing about the Montauk chair is it grants whoever's sitting in it psychic powers.
I was going to say 3 wishes. Okay, sorry.
So there was if you watch Stranger Things, there was a very similar chair, and that's what it was
Yeah.
inspired by.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
So that's the Philadelphia experiment. But let's come back to Jessup. What happened to our old boy Jessup? Because remember, he was getting he was visited by the ONR. He was getting warned, like, you really should stop looking into this. So let's revisit old Jessup. So Jessup had, in the beginning, been downright obsessed with Allen's claims. So he had gone on to gather as much evidence as he could possibly find. And remember, his book about UFOs, like he was a very well published, well regarded author. But after the ONR visited him, his career just died. His reputation appeared to have been ruined. He wrote additional books, but they just never got they never got legs in the market again. So that was basically the end of his publishing career.
He got tied to some kooky shit, and so
right,
the community, science community, was like, "No, thank you."
So in 1958, Jessup gave his research to a friend by the name of Ivan Sanderson. And the reason he does so is he asks Ivan to keep the research safe and then, quote unquote, just in case something happens to me. Fast forward a year. And on April 19th of 1959, Jessup calls his friend Manson Valentine, saying that he has made a breakthrough in his findings. And he wants to meet with Valentine the next day to talk about it. The next day, April 20th, Jessup and Valentine do not meet because Jessup is found.
420.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, a 420. Because Jessup is found dead in his car from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh my goodness.
A hose had been lodged in the exhaust pipes to force the gas into the interior.
Mm-hmm.
And then washcloths have been crammed along the windows to prevent fumes from escaping. So the officials claimed suicide, but no autopsy was ever performed.
Mm-hmm.
Thus is the end of Jessup's story.
Oh, Jessup, I'm sorry.
Yeah, man, that sucks.
Okay, so of course we don't know what this research was or this breakthrough was.
Nope. That was the end of that. Because Valentine sure didn't find out. Yeah. If he had made it to Valentine, we might have found out, but they got him last minute. So let's see. So let me pause and give you my sources. And there's a reason for this. It'll be obvious in a minute. So I'm putting this together. I pulled from Wikipedia on it, of course. Also a couple of really good YouTube videos. One is entitled "The Experiment Gone Wrong: The Philadelphia Experiment" by Wildwood Video Archive, and then "The Philadelphia Experiment: The Truth About Invisibility, Teleportation, and Time Travel" by the Y-Files, another great channel. And then there's 2 articles from All That's Interesting. So one, and this is why I bring it out now, How the Philadelphia Experiment Became Famous Despite Never Happening by Katie Serena, who is a staff writer. And then Inside the Montauk Project, the U.S. military's alleged mind control program by Marco Margaritov, who is also a staff writer. And those two in particular, like they not only staff writers, they also had like additional people who would like go by and verify, their
Mhm.
research stuff. The
Yeah.
reason I point I want to point to Katie's article in particular, because when I was reading her article, the top comments, of course, this is the internet, take it as you will, but the top comment submitted 2 years ago from now was by a user named Reemberger, if I'm pronouncing that right. But this is interesting. The commenter says, Katie, my late father was a U.S. Navy World War II veteran. He lived through some of the fiercest battles, including Midway and the Battle of the Bulge. He was on a ship that was adjacent to the Eldridge when the Philadelphia experiment commenced. He witnessed the ship completely disappear and reappear 3 hours later and heard the screams of the sailors that were literally fused into the ship.
Oh,
Yes, this really happened. Did the ship time travel? Probably not.
that gave me chills. I
Right?
don't know if any of that is meaningful, but it gave me chills nonetheless.
Yeah, that's
That's why I brought it
it's
up.
unsettling.
That's why I brought it up, despite it being an internet comment, because it was just.
Yeah. Ooh.
So before I close out here, let me give you a fair shake to some of the skeptical conclusions on this.
Mhm.
So our main go-to person for this is a gentleman by the name of Edward Dudgeon, who was a Navy electrician, and he was a crew member on the USS Engstrom in the summer of '43. So the Engstrom and the Eldridge were often docked together. So the crews of the two ships like intermingled rather often.
Mhm.
So he says that yes, the Eldridge was indeed rigged up with some special generators, but not quite so exciting. He says the Navy was experimenting. They were experimenting with the Eldridge and with generators they attached to it, but they weren't trying to make the ship invisible. Rather, they were trying to make the ship disappear, but disappear to radar. What they were doing
Oh.
was a process that's called degaussing the ship,
Mhm.
which involves sending a bunch of high voltages through the structure of the ship, which can render the ship invisible to torpedoes from German
Oh.
U-boats.
Well, that's still cool.
Right.
Not as sexy, but still
So,
cool.
so his pet theory is he thinks that passersby, people aboard ships that were passing by at the time, might have overheard them talking about that and misunderstand what they meant by invisibility.
Mm, okay.
Uh, so he goes on to say that he thinks the disappearing bar fight was simply a matter of some rowdy sailors' lips getting too loose when they were drinking, saying too much that the public shouldn't be hearing, and that they were escorted out the back of the bar. Hence disappeared.
Hmm.
Yeah, he says that he goes on to say that the day of the alleged disappearance, the Eldridge actually just left the dock normally around 11 p.m. And but he thinks that, okay, so anyone who had gone looking for the ship, who had seen it, been there the whole time, but had come back to look for it, after 11 p.m. would see it was gone all of a sudden. So maybe that's where this came from, but it just, floated off normally. Uh,
Hmm.
he verifies that the Eldridge did go to Virginia, and returned to Philadelphia the next morning, which you would think for 200 miles is a bit too quick. But his explanation is that when it comes to making long trips like that and making them fast, the Navy actually has some access to special channels. And the one in particular is the Chesapeake Delaware Canal, which you can look up on a map. It's kind of a straight line between Virginia and Philadelphia. So it cuts the trip down to 6 hours.
Oh, wait.
Uh,
But it went down. When did it leave though? Not 11 p.m. and came back the
uh,
next morning. That's still more than 6 hours
well,
or
yeah.
12
But
hours, really, if it's both
right.
ways.
But it's still faster than going the long way, which is the point. Not necessarily it was exactly 6 hours, but that was uh the whole point being that if you're not accounting for that and you're expecting the ship to kind of go down the the eastern seaboard, that it's would never reach Philadelphia that quickly. Hence, like, it had to have done some teleportation, which no, there's a canal that goes through the country instead. It's a little bit faster.
Hmm.
But fast
But
enough
there's
to put you there 10 minutes before you left.
right. I was like, but people are still saying they saw them at a certain time and that they were in Virginia and they were still in Philadelphia, or they had just
Indeed.
disappeared from Philadelphia.
Indeed.
So
Yeah, you might be able to get there 6 hours faster, but not 10 minutes before you left.
yeah, okay. I was like, I still feel like it's too fast.
Right.
That might be just a little too quick, you know. It's like
It's still not adding up to me.
Right. Well, keep that in mind. So some other skepticism to give credence to. There's a historian by the name of Mike Dash who calls shenanigans on all of this, and he stated that many of the authors who followed Jessup, Jessup having his own credence, but a lot of the authors that followed him and publicized stuff about experiment performed little, if any, research. And that other literature has come out since has been criticized for dramatizing or embellishing in some details, or in some cases just outright plagiarizing other books. Another thing to note is that Einstein never completed his unified field theory, hence it being unpublished.
Mhm.
Some 4th Naval District personnel claimed that the whole thing was just a misunderstanding of normal research they performed during World War II at that shipyard. There's a dude by the name of Robert Gorman who wrote for Fate magazine, and this is the one I really want to point out. He states that Carlos Allende / Carl Allen was in fact Carl Meredith Allen, who had a history of psychiatric illness, which calls him into question. And again, this is where indeed, Allen comes back and later admits he made all 3 characters up, even though he justifies it as he's trying to scare Jessup. Another fact is supposedly the Eldridge wasn't even commissioned until August of 43, and that it was in New York City until September of 43. Of course, October still comes after September, so so a counterpoint to that is maybe the ship's logs were falsified. Then O&R itself made some statements, the Office of Naval Research.
Okay.
September of 96, they come out and said, O&R has never conducted investigations on radar invisibility, either in 1943 or at any other time. Which, hey,
Wait.
They didn't say actual invisibility.
Yeah, I'm like, you picked out the boring one. What the hell?
Right?
Of course
Say
they
a
did.
little suspect.
Of course they did.
Then in April of 1999, some Navy vets who had served on the Eldridge told a Philadelphia newspaper that their ship never even left the port. And then, for what it's worth, the Eldridge's complete World War II action report, including its time in the shipyard, is available on microfilm. So if you so care to do so, you can go look at it yourself.
Cool.
So let's end this with some questions. Was Allen delusional? Even Jessup in his later days would write him off. Or was Allen scapegoated? Was Dudgeon, our skeptic, was he correct? Or are his claims aiding a cover-up of what really happened? So whatever happened to the USS Eldridge after all of this? Well, unfortunately, it's not too interesting. Greece took ownership of it. When they took the USS Eldridge over there, they rechristened it the HS Leon. And they used it in some Cold War era exercises, but then it was dismantled and sold for scrap metal during the 90s, the end. So,
did they find human parts in the walls?
Not that I saw noticed. So,
short and sweet. Just the end.
Yep. So
Nothing
the
else.
Eldridge,
That's wild.
the Eldridge, unfortunately, is no more, or it still exists in scraps of metal. So, you know,
I'd be
if you can
interested
get
to
your
find a
hands on
piece of. I'd be interested to find just a piece of that. And
just
get-
with a hand fused to it.
There's a fingernail in there. Truth.
Well, that was a wild tale.
I want to know what happened to the brothers.
Yeah, where are they?
I do too, and so I want to come back to this again to do some coverage over the Montauk Project, because I get the feeling there's a lot more to say about that, and hopefully we can learn more about the brothers' 1983 adventures. So we shall see.
Adventures in 1983. To the arcade. To the movie theater where things are in color.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine jumping, like being in 1943 one moment, 1983 the next, of all the decades to jump from one to another?
Yeah.
That would have to be some jarring.
I mean, some things would stay the same in a certain aspect. I think, yeah, the biggest thing that they would be shocked at is like video game, like arcade games, because that was when they were really breaking out, and the music, the style of the cars. It'd be it'd be way crazier for them to come from 1943 to today, where
Right.
it's like,
that'd
hey,
be upsetting.
in my pocket, I carry a device that has more technology than what they took to the moon. By the way, they went to the moon in 1969, but I use it to make imaginary pigs launch into imaginary walls.
Okay, I guess I feel kind of dumb this episode. So I still don't understand their ages, because if you time travel 40 years, are they like slowly aging over that time? Because if they're in their 20s in 1943, pop up into existence in 1983, I would expect they'd still be in their 20s. In which case they wouldn't be 57 5 years later.
Yeah, the reason I didn't bring that up is I am just as confused as you are.
Okay.
Like,
I was like, am I dumb? Am I not understanding?
Because when you first brought it up, it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't math out between 43 to 83. I was thinking, it's like, well, maybe the time travel accounts for it. But then I don't know. Does anybody know time travel math?
Yeah, come on. We need a professional.
Well, wish granted, because here I am. So,
all right, well, explain it.
Yeah,
all right, so let's say he was in his 20s, right, when he landed
in 43.
In 40. He was
Mhm.
he was in his 20s in 43, and
And
then he
then
was
what did I say in 88? Was it 88? I said, let me check.
He dropped into 1983, but in 1988 he came
claimed-
out after
and
the
he-
Philadelphia experiment
at age 57.
movie.
at age
Yeah.
57. So the only explanation there is that when he eventually returned backwards, he may have, and I want to say, because I've heard this story, and I watched the movie. Actually, I watched the movie and the sequel. There's 3 movies about the Philadelphia experiment. There's a Philadelphia experiment which came out that you referenced. There's a sequel, and then there was a remake in 2012 that so go ahead.
I'm sorry. Wait, so they went from 1943, dropped into 1983, and you're saying they went back?
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, if I'm
okay.
remembering one of the stories correctly, because in the movie in the movie he doesn't. His brother does. His brother, like, because in the movie it's also 2 brothers, and they're slow in the movie, if I recall, they're like, his hand is vanishing a little bit, and then eventually his brother in the movie disappears, and in order to put everything right, because I think it's like creating like this wormhole that's going to destroy everything, and if I'm remembering this movie wrong, I'm sorry. I'm not. I could pull it up on Wikipedia, but I'm too lazy. I remember that at the end of the film, the main guy, he's able to get back to the ship, and he's wearing a protective suit, and he needs to destroy what's creating it, and his brother's now back on the ship. It's put him back on the ship, and he destroys the generators or whatever it is that's causing it, and he says a goodbye to his brother because he wants to stay because he's fallen in love, of course. 1983, 1984 film. And so
Sure.
he stays in 1984 and his brother goes back to 1943. But from the stories that I've read and I've heard this in passing, so what it was is that he couldn't stay synced with 1983 so much. Like he was here for a while, but then he would phase back, but he wouldn't phase back straight back to 1943. He would phase back. The time would equate to however long he was gone. So if he was here for several years, like if you're here for 3 years, so what is that? 1986, then you'd go back to 1946.
Okay.
But like more or
Ooh,
less
and
that,
you do remember that in our 2012 episode, we did talk about a guy who was stuck in 2 timelines at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it,
Oh, is it him?
but more or less, like
Sorry.
if I remember correctly, when he did eventually like phase back forever, he didn't go straight back to 1943. I think he landed like several years later and then lived his life up to that point. And so he was younger than he should have been. So he was like 28 in like 1960 when he should have been, at that point in probably his 40s, but or something like that. But yeah.
I just like that, at least in the movie version of the story, like we have this guy jump from the Philadelphia experiment to Stranger Things.
Yeah. Well,
crossover episode.
weird tends to connect. So I remember in the movie too, he's able to get back by jumping over the side of the ship at the end. Because that's what they did the first time. Because it's like at the beginning of the movie, the two brothers, what happens is they just jump. They're freaking out, and if I remember correctly, and they jump off the ship and they land in 1980 or 1984 or whenever the movie's supposed to take place. And at the end of the film, it's almost like I want to say he's tethered in some way. So when he jumps off the ship, they're able to pull him back where he was. And I want to say like at the end, like his brother, all old, comes and visits him or something like that, but I don't know.
So
wild.
There is a lot more to learn about our boy Al/Edward. And again, to pursue his story further means going into the Montauk Project, because that's where part 2 of his story goes. That's why I want to venture into that in the near future. If you go look up our boy Al, there are various books and documentaries involving him. There's actually one I wanted to watch for this episode, but it's not online, at least that I could find. Like it's one that's like you gotta go order the DVD off of Amazon or something. So, but yeah, I'm very curious to see what we have yet to learn about this guy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
So to be continued.
To be continued. Well, that concludes our latest episode of Little Podcast of Horrors. If you enjoyed,
if you were aboard the USS Eldridge, or if you were at Camp Hero, or if you have traveled through time between the two, we would love to hear from you.
Or if you're just, a regular time traveler that at one point bumped into somebody who was on the USS Eldridge also traveling through time and you want to share your story, let us know. You could email us at Little Podcast.
Yeah, if you could violate your don't tell anybody rule just one time.
Just one time.
For us.
You can email us at
Little Podcast
at gmail.com.
Yeah, no one's going to come looking for you.
No
one isn't listening to this.
Nobody gives a shit about us. We aren't even on their radar. And if we are, they're like,
You might say we're invisible to their radar.
Oh, damn. That was good. We Philadelphia this. Yeah, that's what we did. Alrighty.
All right. And don't forget that we take donations. So
yeah. Please give. Help us. You want to keep doing
All
this.
right.
Alrighty. Well, then, until next time, James.
What?
Good job. Hail Ashtar.
Hail Ashtar.
Hail Ashtar. I was like, come on, man. It's not hard. Just, oh my gosh.